Good morning, everyone. Sorry I can't be there in person today, but I'm deciding to use flipped classroom technology so that I can at least share something with you via the wonders of YouTube. So, taking into consideration today's theme about critical thinking on the web, I've decided to share with you a visible thinking routine called Zoom In. Um, it's not very techy, but it is a really great way of teaching critical thinking, and it's really fun a lot of the time as well. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope you find it useful. So, just to give you a really quick intro, if you haven't already heard of it, visible thinking is an approach that was developed at Project Zero, which is educational research group from Harvard. And they did a lot of work with schools and put together a list of approaches to explicitly teach thinking. And what the guys from Project Zero say is that thinking is one of those things that's kind of left to chance in school, and that there's a lot of research that shows that metacognition and critical thinking skills lead to good outcomes. So they developed some approaches that focus on how to teach it. So they have a list of routines which can be used in a classroom. They're designed to be used K to 12 and in any subjects. And they've talked a lot in their book about what they call the 8 cultural forces. I won't go into it today, but it's worth having a look at any of those things if this kind of seems like something interesting for you after today's video. So I'm going to show you a routine called Zoom In. So this is a routine that's been developed to get people to look closely. So what you do is you get a picture and you zoom in on different parts of it, showing different close-up sections of a picture moving out to reveal the whole thing. You'll get a feel for how it looks at the moment. Students love it because it's fun. They think it's a game. And it's a really great way of harnessing student curiosity, especially at the beginning of a unit or the beginning of a lesson. So I'm going to run you through one I've created. Now, this is a history source. And I'll give you an idea of how you would run it in a classroom. So I've just written here, each time you reveal a picture, the idea is to really prompt deeper discussion from your students. So if they present a guess of what they think the whole image is, then you say, what makes you say that? And that's a phrase that was developed at Project Zero, and it's something about those words that actually makes students reflect on their thinking and present better justifications for what they said. And when you get your theories, the Project Zero guys say the best prompt is what else? Because if you say anything else, students tend to think, nah, that's okay, that'll do. What else makes them search their mind a bit more to see if there's anything else they could possibly suggest. So here we go. Okay, so this is the first reveal. So you would ask students what they see and get them to try and guess what they think the image might be. And you might use those probing questions to try and get them to mention as much of the detail they can. So for example, when students see this source, they talk about the grass. They talk about what they think looks like a sword. Often students will mention a leg, so then you might draw out of them that it looks like quite a muscly leg, for example. And then when you feel like you've kind of got everything you can out of this image, then you would move to the next one. So here you've got a caption underneath. I like to prompt them to reflect on the feelings they get from those words, and it then builds kind of a sense of the mood or the tone of what this whole image would be. And you can see here they get a bit more of the bottom of the image as well. Okay, so again, you can see it's the same image, but we're moving further out now. And here's where you can start asking whether this reveal has changed the student's hypothesis or not, um, in terms of what they think the whole picture will be. You notice that you get a bit more information in the clothing that this guy is wearing in the picture. You can see a very muscly arm. And usually by this point, you get students starting to say they think this is a gladiator. So again, they're really starting to engage with the detail of the source. And if you can say, well, what makes you say that? They start justifying, the clothing looks Roman, the sword looks Roman, etc. So then you get a picture of the guy's face, and we've just zoomed in on his face here. And this is when you would ask whether this confirms what the students had identified this as, or whether it's changed their mind again. Usually by this point it confirms it, but you do get some really interesting discussion around like his face, because we've got just that detail there for students to discuss and to reflect on. And then you've got nearly the whole picture here. So by this point, students tend to, think they've nailed it and that it's a picture of a Roman in a jungle, that sort of discussion. And then we get to the last slide, and this is what's on his shield. And this is one thing, if you do a zoom in, is thinking about the order that you're revealing things. By revealing this last, it actually changes the way that students interpret the whole source, because you've got the hammer and the sickle. This is a Soviet symbol. Suddenly the source totally changes its meaning from what they think it is. Very few guess that this is a piece of Cold War propaganda, which is what it is. So what's the benefit of giving this to students? There's a few things that we really get out of doing this routine with students. The first thing is it forces them to look closely. All the time in my subject area, students look at something and they just kind of glaze over the first impressions. It's a soldier with a shield. It actually, by zooming in, makes them break down the source into parts. And for my subject, that's really useful because they have to analyse sources. They have to look at a picture in detail and talk about all the components and how they create the whole. So if you were getting students to talk about how Soviets were portrayed in propaganda, for example, you've actually just got them to analyse the source together. And then what we usually do afterwards is get them to then write something up about it. So it's a really great way of doing that, and they really do find it very fun. It becomes a game, to see who can guess what it is first. They really do enjoy it as well. So yeah, I already talked about just thinking about the order of the reveals is actually quite significant. What do you want to hold out on? How can you put things in the best order to really draw in their curiosity? But often, as you can see in that source, one part of it can totally change the meaning. And so it'd be quite interesting to leave that to last so they can reflect on that. So if you're interested in finding out more about visible thinking, these are two really good places to go. This here is the Project Zero official site. I'll just show you quickly. So this is the intro. We'll skip that. You can see down here they've got their menu, and I talked before about routines. Most of their routines are online, and so say we're looking at core routines. I mentioned what makes you say that is on here as a core routine, but there's a whole bunch of different things that you can look at, and if you click on it, it explains how you would use that routine, why you might use that routine, etc. These guys have also published a book called Making Thinking Visible, and it goes into a lot of these in a lot more detail. The other site that's worth having a look at is these guys here. That's not affiliated with Harvard, but they have a really good breakdown of samples of the different routines and what they might look like in your classroom. I really like teaching them because the students enjoy them. And if you're like me, and you're kind of struggling to think of something creative sometimes, these routines will often mix it up for you without you having to, invent it for yourself. So in terms of making a zoom in, there's just a couple of tips. The first one is to make sure that you pick a large size image. So I'll show you how to do that in case you don't already know. I'm sure you probably all do. So say I'm going to pick another piece of propaganda, different war. So you go to Google and you hit images. And I know you probably all know this, but in case you don't, if you go to search tools, you can change the size. Always pick large. You will have noticed that picture I shared was a bit pixelated. That's because that's the best definition I could find. If you don't pick a large image, then when you try and zoom in, the picture will just go all fuzzy and it won't work. So always make sure that you're choosing a big image. This one looks pretty good to me. So I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste that into a new slide. So there's loads of ways that you can zoom in on the image, and again, I'm sure you probably know quite a few ways, but I like to work in Google Slides, and a really easy way to do that is just to crop certain sections. So if you double click, you can see you get this black framing that will actually crop your picture. So if I was zooming in on this, I might want to start with, it does that sometimes, make sure you're moving the black ones. I might want to start with the soldiers and just have the toy soldiers. So you just move the black frame around there. When you're happy with what you got, hit enter, and there you go, you've got your image, and then you can just drag it out to make it a bit bigger again. And so that might be the first image that we picked, and so forth. So it's not really an on the web, but it is a really great critical thinking activity. And like I said, the routines are such a great way for teaching thinking that students enjoy, and it does lay it all out for you. So it's quite nice to have a structure there, so you don't have to think of everything for yourself. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope you found it useful. If you want to know anything more about visible thinking, do feel free to drop me a line. And in the meantime, I wish you all a great holiday, and I look forward to seeing you in 2016.